You are sitting in a room where the heating barely works, somewhere in Eastern Europe where the sky is always the color of wet concrete. You are wearing a heavy sweater that hides your frame. Your hair is dyed a dull, forgettable brown. You drink bitter coffee from a paper cup and watch the street through a gap in the curtains that is exactly 1 inch wide. To the landlord who collects your rent in cash, you are a freelance translator who values her privacy. To the few neighbors you pass in the hallway, you are absolutely nobody. A shadow. An invisible woman living an invisible life. But 4 years ago, you were the most dangerous woman in your country's intelligence apparatus. 4 years ago, you did not wear oversized sweaters. You wore tailored suits. You walked through the high-security corridors of a government building that officially does not exist on any public map. You were a senior strategic analyst. You had a level of security clearance that allowed you to read the true architecture of the world. You knew the exact coordinates of covert facilities, the real identities of deep cover operatives, and the movement schedules of assets operating in hostile territories. You were brilliant, flawless, and entirely underestimated. The men in the briefing rooms saw a quiet, efficient woman who prepared perfect reports. They never saw the predator observing their vulnerabilities. And that was their first fatal mistake. Your descent into the shadows did not start with a dramatic kidnapping or a threat in a dark alley. It started with simple, crushing mathematics. Your mother was diagnosed with a degenerative illness. The state health insurance you relied on offered a waiting list that was longer than her life expectancy. The private treatment required resources you simply did not possess. You spent your days managing the security of an entire nation and your nights calculating how many weeks your mother had left. Desperation is the most effective recruiter in the world. The approach was subtle, a polite conversation at a diplomatic reception. An elegant man with a neutral accent who knew exactly what you were going through. He did not ask you to betray your country. He simply asked for a small administrative favor, a structural schedule, a meaningless logistical detail that would help his corporate clients avoid bureaucratic friction. In exchange, an offshore account would receive enough capital to secure your mother's permanent care. You rationalized it. It was just a single document. It was just data. It was not violence. It was just digital ink on a screen. You accepted the arrangement. You solved your personal deficit. You thought it was a one-time transaction. That is the universal lie of the underworld, the fairy tale you tell yourself to sleep at night. You took the money, and the heavy steel door locked behind you forever. The requests escalated. They always escalate. The elegant man represented a syndicate that operated in the space between international espionage and the global black market. They needed intelligence, and you were the perfect pipeline. You learned to bypass the most sophisticated cybersecurity systems on the planet. You memorized encryption keys. You used modified digital drives smaller than a fingernail to extract classified dossiers. You transferred the information through dead drops in busy city parks, leaving a specific magazine on a specific bench, never making physical contact with your handlers. You became a ghost inside the machine. The financial compensation became obscene. Millions of dollars flowed into decentralized ledgers and phantom corporations registered in jurisdictions that do not cooperate with international authorities. You bought a luxury apartment. You wore watches that cost more than a normal agent's yearly salary. You justified your sudden wealth to your colleagues by claiming a lucrative family inheritance. You lived in a state of absolute intoxicating power. You were untouchable because you controlled the very systems designed to catch people like you. But moving secrets is a toxic business. The abstraction of the data soon collided with reality. You started noticing the consequences of the files you transmitted. A covert government operation in the Middle East inexplicably failed. An Allied contact in South America suddenly vanished without a trace. A network of safe houses was systematically dismantled by hostile forces. You read the internal damage reports at your desk, maintaining a perfectly professional expression while your stomach turned to pure ice. You were not pulling a trigger, but your keystrokes were erasing human lives. You were providing the architecture for their destruction. You tried to compartmentalize the guilt. You told yourself you were just a facilitator, But at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling of your luxury apartment, the silence was deafening. You realized you had become the exact monster your agency had trained you to hunt. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday. The collapse of your golden cage was not an explosion. It was a microscopic shift in the atmosphere. You swiped your security badge at the main entrance of the intelligence headquarters. The light flashed green, but the mechanical click of the gate took exactly 1 second longer than usual. It was a fractional delay, but to a highly trained operative, an anomaly is a siren. You walked to your desk. Your supervisor greeted you, but his eyes did not meet yours. The internal network required a secondary verification that had never been requested before. The agency's internal security division was running a silent audit, and you were the target. They had found a pattern. A digital footprint you thought you had completely erased. The state was building a net around you. But that was only half of the nightmare. You went to the restroom, locked yourself in a stall, and turned on your encrypted burner phone to alert your handlers that the protocol was compromised. You expected extraction. You expected the syndicate to activate a safety plan to pull their most valuable asset out of the fire. The message you received contained only 3 words. Asset is liability. The air left your lungs. The room began to spin. You understood the absolute unforgiving mathematics of the shadow market. To your government, you were a traitor who needed to be interrogated and placed in a concrete box for the rest of your natural life. To the syndicate, you were a walking archive of their operations. A loose thread that needed to be permanently resolved before you could testify. You were completely alone, trapped between the crushing weight of the state and the merciless efficiency of the underworld. Both sides had the resources to find you. Both sides had decided you were a problem. You had exactly 20 minutes before the internal security teams descended on your floor. Your training took over. You did not panic. Panic is a luxury for civilians. You walked out of the building with steady, measured steps. You left your personal phone on your desk. You left your coat on your chair. You walked down the street, merging into the lunchtime crowd, becoming invisible. You could not go home. Your apartment was already a compromised zone. You could not call your mother. A single call would trace the signal and place a permanent target on her back. To save her life, you had to let her believe that her brilliant, successful daughter had simply vanished into thin air. You had to disappear without leaving a single ripple in the water. You activated your absolute last resort, a hidden locker in a subway station containing a sterile passport, untraceable cash, and a new physical identity. You took 3 different trains. You changed your clothes in a public restroom. You slipped out of the country in the cargo hold of a commercial transport vehicle, surrounded by the smell of diesel and cold steel. Now, you are here. In this freezing room, you survived the initial hunt. You outsmarted 2 of the most dangerous organizations on the planet. But you realize now that survival is not the same as freedom. You have $20 million sitting in digital wallets that you can never access, because the moment you trigger a transaction, your location will instantly flash on the monitors of the people hunting you. You are a multimillionaire who lives on cheap canned soup and instant coffee. Paranoia is your permanent skin. You sleep in fragments. If a car idles outside your building for more than 2 minutes, you have your hand on your emergency bag, ready to run. If someone knocks on the door down the hall, your heart rate skyrockets to 140 beats per minute. You memorize the faces of everyone on your street, looking for the cold, calculating eyes of a professional sent to close your file. You cannot make a friend. You cannot hold a conversation. You cannot fall in love. Bringing someone into your life means pulling them into a blast radius they do not deserve. You are completely isolated, a prisoner of your own classified memories. You traded your soul, your family, and your identity for a fortune you cannot spend and a power that evaporated the second you became a risk. You look away from the gap in the curtains. You sit on the edge of the narrow bed. The rain continues to beat against the glass. You are the smartest woman in the shadows, the architect of 1,000 secrets. And your ultimate reward is an eternity of waiting in the dark, listening to the footsteps in the hallway, wondering if today is the day the ghosts finally come to collect their debt.